So welcome everyone out there in Zoom land. I feel like we live in Zoom land now. First of all, I wanted to say before we begin, I wanted to congratulate Joe and Kamala on their win and inauguration, which was fabulous. And I don't know about you, but I feel so relieved. I felt so much better after watching that inauguration. I'm proud to be an American today, which I wasn't for the last 4 years. This event is sponsored by the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts, where I am the director of the studio program. And I've started doing these once a month. We've been coming up with different programming since we're not doing all of our live events. Usually we're doing a lot of things here. And I thought I would, this is based on a class I teach at Pratt. I teach a professional practice class to MFA students. And the class is basically once a week, I bring in a guest and we bring in the owner of the gallery and we talk about everything about galleries. So I thought I would do a similar thing, but for an adult audience, not that they're young adults. And I did the first one last month on artist books, which was really fun. And then I was thinking about the nonprofit galleries, since we actually have one here at EFA. So Dylan is one of the other programs at the Elizabeth Foundation. So I thought that would be something that would be good to talk about, and also to talk about how things have changed since Corona. So, and about myself, so yes, I'm Bill Carroll. I see a lot of people there. I already know you, and I'm the director at EFA of the studio program. I'm teaching the class at Pratt. But I also just realized the other day, I was thinking it's 2021, which is now my 40th year working in the New York art world. So I started out at the Dia Art Foundation in 1981. And that is a very scary, like 40 years sounds really scary. Of course, I was 10 years old when I started. So, I'm not that old. Anyway, so we're gonna do, I'm gonna try and do this once a month. I'm very happy to welcome our three guests, Gabriel de GUZMAN, who is the curator and director of exhibitions at SMAC Mellon, Dylan GAUTHIER. There are three programs at the Elizabeth Foundation. I'm running the studio program, and Dylan is the director of the EFA project space. And EILEEN LYNCH, who is the visual arts curator at Wave Hill. So instead of me reading your bios, I thought that I would just ask you to tell us about your journey through the art world and how you got to where you are. And I'm also curious, are you where you planned to be? Was this something you aimed at? Because I know I just ended up in all these jobs that I didn't even know about residencies, and I'm running a studio program. So as I say, if you just tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are, and as I say, I'm kind of curious, is this where you were aiming for originally? So why don't we start with, I'm just going by box order here. Gabriel, you're first.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you, Bill, for inviting me to speak. I'll try to give the condensed version of my journey to where I am. Yeah, I started actually in the New York art world. I grew up in Virginia mainly, and I went to college at the University of Virginia, and then I came up to New York after I graduated. And I started in development, actually. I was working first at the Whitney Museum in the development department there, and then the Jewish Museum. And then at the Jewish Museum, I was working in sort of their grants office, which was like corporate foundation to government support or something like that, working on grants. And then after a few years of doing that, I realized that I was really missing studying the actual art object. So I decided to, and working with artists, so I decided to go back to grad school, and I got a master's at Hunter. But while I was at Hunter part-time, the Jewish Museum hired me, one of their curators hired me as a project assistant on one of their exhibitions that they were working on. And that was my foot in the door to curatorial work. And so anyway, you know, after a few years of being a curatorial assistant at the Jewish Museum, Wave Hill hired me to be their assistant curator at first, and then I was promoted to curator of visual arts. So I was EILEEN's predecessor, basically. And I spent 7 years at Wave Hill, and it was a really great experience for me, working with artists that are interested in exploring our relationship to the natural world. And and then I was working on a lot of site-specific projects there. So and then I got hired at Mellon, and I'm the director of exhibitions and curator here. So I'm sort of the in-house curator here. And I don't curate all of the shows, but I curate most of them. And then if we have a guest curator, I work with them. But because Mellon is such a unique space, my experience working with artists who create work site specifically or are responding to a space or a site really helped me, or has helped me here. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So, but when you were first, I'm just curious, when you were first doing development, was that where you thought you were originally gonna? No, it's just a matter of.
I couldn't wait to like never have to write another grant proposal or report on funds that we, you know, how the funds were used for a specific grant. No, I mean, I do a little bit of that, I have to say, at Mellon, because we don't have a full-time development person here. So I am involved in grant writing here, but curating is really what I'm most passionate about.
And you're so good at it.
Thanks.
Thanks, you've included so many EFA artists in the shows that you've done, which we really appreciate.
Well, you have such great artists there.
We do. I agree. Okay, EILEEN, how did you get where you are?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Bill, for the invitation to participate. So how did I get here? I studied actually advertising and art history at Syracuse University. And I worked in advertising for 4 years after that. Always interested in the fine arts, but went the commercial route for a while. Decided or knew that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. And went to grad school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where I got my master's in arts administration and policy. And while I was there, just starting, I secured an internship in the contemporary art department at the Art Institute of Chicago, and started, working. It was a relatively small department of, I think, maybe 6 or 7 people. And then I worked my way up to provenance researcher and then research assistant. So I was working while getting my master's. And then after I graduated, they hired me as a contract position as research assistant. And it was a really exciting time because it was when they were opening up the modern wing. And so to have more space, the Renzo Piano building to display modern and contemporary art, and to really see that built from the ground up, going in with hard hat visits. And the curator had it was called a dollhouse, had a scaled down model of the wing, and you could move around the scaled down works and people in the space, and see how the collection would look and the shows would look. And I had a really great experience there. And then I decided to come back to New York, and worked at Speroni Westwater, which is a gallery on the Lower East Side. And I worked there for 5 years, so pretty long time, or 5.5 years actually, as the archivist, and really took, was really focused on research there, but was able to dabble in all aspects of the gallery. Actually dabbled in sales and was able to go to the Hong Kong Art Fair and actually sold a work, which was great, earned my keep. And be able to speak, because I said, I'm able to speak Mandarin and I know the artist, and, therefore, like, can you send me to Hong Kong? And so that was an amazing experience. And to have worked in the different facets of the art world is just, it's a great experience. My next step was then to RX Art as the operations manager. And it was conveniently only 2 blocks away from Speroni Westwater. So on the Lower East Side. And so RX Art commissions contemporary artists to create site-specific installations for children's hospitals. So that was a nice foray into site-specific work, but really with specific parameters. There are protocols in place for the hospitals, but the mission is just so great to be able to to see the smiles on the kids' faces and to really make a difference, from creating a vinyl on the walls, on CAT scan machines, to commissioning artists to create drawings for coloring books that were then given out to the hospitals or donated to the hospitals. And then from there, I moved on to Wave Hill, where I am currently. So I'm curator of visual arts, and I've been there for 3 years now. And it's just such a, as Gabriel said, it's such a unique place. It's the arts is one of the pillars of the organization. So it's arts education and horticulture, and the arts really features the connections between nature, culture, and site, and to see, to be able to commission artists to create these place-based works, and to also be able to provide support and time and space for them to take in their experience and be nurtured, and then create a site-specific project there is really special.
Excellent, thank you. And I think I forgot that you had worked at a commercial gallery, which it's an education.
It sure is.
I mean, in some ways, this is all the same thing. I always say we're all fighting basically to get money from the same people, whether you're a nonprofit or you're trying to sell art at a gallery. It's really a small group of people who actually support the arts, but it's just such a different angle. I loved working in a gallery, because I did it almost 20 years, but at some point I was just like, man, I don't want to sell art anymore. It's really hard.
It is. It's really stressful and hard.
Artists do not realize how hard it is.
And I didn't complete the sale until, I was on the plane back to New York. Like, it was really.
It feels when you actually close the deal, it does feel good.
It does feel
And
good.
Dylan, how did you get where you are?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dylan Gauthier. So yeah, I am the director for the EFA Project Space Program, which is one of 3 programs of EFA and Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts. And of course, prepared to talk about many other things, but not to talk about myself, Bill. But I'm happy to give you a short. Well, it's funny thinking back to it. My first job in New York was at working at ArtNet, actually, and I had just gotten to New York in the early 2000s, and was really only planning to be here for a couple of weeks. And at the time, I'd been working with the French government under in the cultural a mission of the cultural service there under Jacques Lang, and had stopped back in California, where I'm from, and was coming back to New York to visit some friends. Thought I would stay for a couple of weeks, and lo and behold, I met someone who was leaving their job at ArtNet like the next day, and I told them that I was a translator and had been doing literary translation, and they said, "Oh, you might enjoy this." And I hadn't really planned on staying in New York at all, but I sent in my resume and got on an interview. And I think it was just after the .com crash, and things were kind of I don't know, it felt like they were starting to restaff again after they had laid off everyone. So I got hired at ArtNet to be a liaison for French galleries and stayed in New York and worked there for about a year. And after that point, was part of, at the time I was also doing kind of street theater and underground theater, and I'm an artist, I should have said, I'm an artist and a curator, and I was involved in this kind of theater collective, and we were organizing protest theater around the RNC around 2004 here in New York, and wandered into this gallery in Tribeca called Gigantic Art Space that was kind of hosting, it was serving as like a media hub, and there were like bike messengers that were coming in and out of there, and it was like this very dynamic space, and it like felt nothing like a gallery as I had come to understand what galleries were, and I was like so relieved, and I was like, what is this place? And I just kind of started volunteering there, and then they hired me, and I ended up becoming the associate director there after a year, and helping run the program down on Franklin Street, 59 Franklin, where after we were closed down, Kansas and a couple other galleries existed in that space. Which of course now is again kind of the hotspot. At the time, it felt like we were like there were like 3 galleries down there. There was like Artist Space and something called Pablo's Birthday and a couple other like kind of weirder little like gallery spaces. Of course, Art in General was right around the corner. But that was kind of like, it just kind of went from there as a trajectory. And so I started curating shows there, and getting more involved in everyday operations. And it was I was going to say it was a very strange space because it was like not a nonprofit, but everyone who came there thought it was a nonprofit, and the kinds of things we were doing were very much not for profit. And because we had a solo funder who owned, it was part of a kind of larger label that they had called like Gigantic, where they did films and records. They had a recording studio, and so like sales was never like, we basically didn't have to sell things, which was great. So so we were never pushed in that direction, and so we got to do a lot of fun stuff, and we ended up working with a lot of the kind of like downtown music scene of former like earlier years in New York, which was pretty great, and there were a lot of people living in that building who were really like tied into like early video and things that kind of became part of my interest and my practice as well. And I guess from there, through there, I ended up after the gallery closed, right before the big crash, like in 2007, 2008, and managed to apply to go to Hunter. I went to Hunter, did my MFA there, and continued, curating projects. And my practice as an artist has always kind of been, crossed over into curating. And I think I met EFA through being invited into a show when Project Space first opened, the first show that Michelle Levy, the founding director, had curated, which was called Beyond a Memorable Fancy, which is a print show. And because this collective that I started called Mar Liberum, which is a ecological arts collective and does a lot of publishing and printmaking. And so we were in that show, and then kind of like the earlier gallery story, like I just kind of kept coming back, and I was like, this place is very cool, and again, like doesn't feel anything like that kind of cookie cutter art world thing that you think a gallery is supposed to be doing, and how exactly they're doing it. And I've always been interested in how these spaces kind of survive, in the margins, and really, while like I think driving, and being kind of the heart of what happens in New York. So I'm really happy to talk more about nonprofits and what they do here, and also I thought a lot about just preparing for tonight, just the difference between the American kind of nonprofit industrial complex and the kinds of galleries that exist as nonprofits here versus in other countries, that kind of often receive more like direct government funding and Kunsthalls and kind of regional art galleries and things that we don't exactly have here. So yeah, I'll stop there. Thanks. And thanks, Bill and Derek, for hosting. And
did you mention that you teach? Did I catch that?
No, yeah, I mean, I started when I got my MFA, I started also teaching. So I teach at Hunter and at the New School.
Thank you. So nonprofit galleries. So I just did a little research, and so White Columns was the first nonprofit alternative space in New York City. It opened in 1970. It was originally called 112 Green Street. They changed the name to White Columns in 1979, I think because the building they moved into had white columns. I'm trying to remember because I started going there like in the early 80s. And it was started by a group of artists. Gordon Matta Clark was one of them. And their mission was white columns provides support to artists who have yet to benefit from wider critical, curatorial, or commercial attention, which I always took to mean basically if you're not being represented by a gallery. Because it's one of the things I'm always telling my students, these are the first places that you will be welcome, that the nonprofit galleries are there to show artists like you who are not established yet. But what I want to ask you, that's just a little bit of history. But what I'd like is to ask you about your nonprofit gallery and what is specific to your gallery in terms of its mission and its role in the community. Like, how do you see yourself? Like, how are you different and really specific as opposed to the other galleries? And why don't we go back in the same order? Gabriel?
Yeah. So let's see. Mellon's mission is to support under-recognized mid-career and women artists through exhibition opportunities, studio workspace, and programming. And we've been around for about 25 years now in Dumbo. We've been in our current space since 2005, but before that, it's always been in different places around Dumbo, and it was originally founded by a small group of artists that were basically putting on shows in their loft studio space, and so it was very like grassroots and DIY in the beginning, and then it evolved and it became more professionalized, and they hired an executive director who is Kathleen Gilrain, who's still the executive director. And then they started a studio program, and there's also an education program it's a high school mentorship program where professional artists work with high school students, to do an art mentorship program. And I think what's unique about our mission is, I guess it's a couple of things. One of the focuses of our mission is to support women artists. At least 60% of the artists that we show or include in any of our programming must be women identifying artists. Often it's more than 60%, often it's 80%, or sometimes we've had shows that's everybody in the show identifies as a woman. And that's just to try and do our part to correct the imbalance of male-dominated representation in the arts. And then lately, we've also made more of a commitment to show cultural diversity. And so I'd say in the last 10, 15 years, at least half of the artists that we show or include in our programming are artists of color. And we also show LGBT artists and diverse gender identities. And the other part of our mission is to show, we show emerging artists who are early career, but the other part of our mission is to show under-recognized mid-career artists. And I think that's really important, especially in the New York art world. There's a lot of attention given to younger artists or artists that are starting out in their careers, and there are grants and art galleries that are supporting emerging artists, but not as many support mid-career artists. And I feel like it happens too often where an artist might make a big splash early in their career, or like after coming out grad school with their MFA, you know, they might get a string of shows somewhere or in different places, and then they sort of stop getting the opportunities, even though they're continuing to make work and the work is still interesting and relevant. So part of our mission has been to show mid-career artists who haven't gotten enough attention, especially, you know, in the more recent years of their career.
No, I didn't realize that about the focus on women artists and the mid-career artists. And it's really tough when you're young, you get out of school, you know a lot of people, it's all hot, you're getting shows. It's very hard when you're older and you're still making great work. So that's a really important, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, EILEEN.
So as I mentioned, so the arts is a program within Wave Hill. Wave Hill's mission is to celebrate the artistry and legacy of its gardens and landscapes and explore connections to the natural world through these programs in the arts, horticulture, and education. And for the arts, it's really important for us to, engage the community, engage with artists about these relevant and contemporary ecological issues that we're facing. And it's a unique site in the sense that it's a public garden, it's a 28-acre public garden and cultural center. So it's not your typical white cube gallery space. The gallery space is within an old mansion, Georgian Revival mansion, and so with the quirks of that, it also makes it really charming as an exhibition space, and through the windows to be able to see the grounds. And then we're also not only just having programming in the indoor exhibition space, we also have the outdoor space as well. So sculptures that are outdoors. I mean, the history of the arts program, can go back to the 70s and 80s. In the 80s, there was, like Carl Andre has showed at Wave Hill, and then Silhouette. And then in the 90s, Jennifer McGregor really built up the arts program to what it is today, and started the residency program, so the winter workspace program that we have going on right now. So that's 2 6-week sessions of 6 artists each, and they work in the space on site. But we also have offered a remote residency as another option for this year. And so it's great to be able to engage with the artistic community in these in this ecological lens.
And the residency, part of it is that they really are supposed to be somehow addressing the site. I mean, the fact that it is this garden, and because I know I've done studio visits up there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the application. You really have to say why, how you're going to engage with with Wave Hill.
We do. We ask that question, and we ask, what could it be inspirational to them, and it could be a multitude of aspects of the site. It could be the grounds, it could be the history, it could be the architecture. So it's various facets.
Very cool. Okay, Dylan.
Yeah, so I think judging by a number of familiar faces on the call who are familiar with EFA, yeah, many of you know the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts. And I think when I talk about Project Space, I always talk about the 3 programs because we are one of the 3. The others being the EFA Studio program and the Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop program. And within the organization, we are, I think, it was the idea. So it was EFA Gallery originally in 2008 when Michelle Levy was brought in. It was kind of reset to EFA Project Space, and so we're really like a project space in that we are process focused, curator led, curator focused as well through open calls for exhibitions. We have an advisory committee that selects generally five curators to work with in a year or in a season. Sometimes, like this year, it's not quite a year, but it's a season, and then they really bring in their communities. So it can really change in terms of what the space is, and that's kind of its intention, is to be this kind of open forum. I think when it was first created by Jane Stevenson, the director of EFA, working with Michelle, the idea was that it was kind of the public forum, and that I think also being within a building where there are so many phenomenal artists at work, we have this other kind of inbuilt responsibility, which is in the relationship to artists who are working in the building and thinking about ways that we can connect with them. And so we also host a residency program called Shift, which is for artists who are also arts workers. And this really comes out of, I think, the unique space that EFA occupies as being run, entirely by artists. I don't think anybody on staff has a degree in this stuff. We're all visual artists who have moved into these various roles that we hold, and I think all the work that we do is really coming from, our knowledge of the art world that we've been navigating, and also coming from our heart and feeling like there's a need for this kind of an organization to support artists really across the spectrum in terms of where people are. Like I don't think that like Project Space. Like the typical project space show has a couple of emerging artists, a couple of mid-career artists, and often some older artists who are like very well known and established as well, and it's really kind of a fusion of of all of those people and bringing in their different experiences. The Shift residency, again, is really unique in that it's aimed at providing support and a cohort and studio visits, professional development, and now studio space, thanks to Bill and Derek and Natalia for providing us with a studio for artists who are also arts workers. And so these are artists who, like we do, work at arts organizations in the city, primarily nonprofits. I think they occupy, they have a variety of roles, from arts educators, curators, arts administrators, and it's really about giving them time and space and a focus to work on their own creative practices, and thinking of their creative practice as what makes them good at the job that they do for these arts organizations as well, because they know inside and out what it is to be an artist and to make work, and then they spend their days at their day job supporting other artists. So we like to give back to them in that way. And what else can I say? Maybe that's all I need to say. Yeah, okay, for now, great.
But now, also, I know all of you have had a few images you wanted to share. And I think, Gabriel, your images were connected to talking about Corona and doing virtual thing, right? But if you wanted, Dylan, did you want to share some images?
Sure, yeah, well, I guess I could just share, well, this is, not, well, sure, hang on. How do I do this?
It's nice.
Share. Here we go. Let's try this. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so I was just gonna share like three images of recent exhibitions, so you can see what Project Space looks like. And this was the Immigrant Artist Biennial 2020, Here Together, curated by Katia Krakowski, who in curating the show for us also became an EFA member, studio member, and so now is in the building and has a studio at EFA, which is amazing synergy. So this was an exhibition of 11 New York-based immigrant artists as part of a larger Immigrant Artist Biennial that Katia founded. And there were, I think Katia's like on the call, so feel free to unmute yourself, Katia. I believe there were 8 sites initially for this biennial in the city, and because of COVID, we all shifted virtually, went online. The other parts of the biennial, most of those exist as a virtual online exhibition now, but we did postpone this from March, when it was supposed to open, I think March 18th, and a few days before, we had decided to close down the building. So postponed, but in postponing, we went online, and I think similar to what others are experiencing, that we decided that there was still a need to produce this content and to work with these artists and to give them oh, there's Gabriel in the middle. This is a Zoom screenshot from one of our virtual events that we did as part of this in pivoting and presenting online conversations with all of the artists involved, and we sort of went to Katya and asked her to speak with the artists and ask what they wanted to present virtually. And I think everybody had been really working, up to this exhibition, which then was on pause. So this feeling of kind of loss and the lost opportunity or the uncertainty of whether we'd ever get to have this exhibition. And so we ended up producing these, three really amazing conversations that happened over those first few weeks of lockdown. And, in many ways, they gave me, personally a sense of hope and fulfillment in being a part of this community and continuing to exist even when we couldn't be in person, and really led us to eventually have the exhibition in person when we had the option to reopen back in the fall. And I think it was, in many ways, it was a better exhibition in that it had, A, more lead time, and B, that we had already kind of established these ties between the artists who got to meet and talk and share their stories and what they were going through and all of the challenges that we were facing. And then to really bring all of those things into the gallery, which, again, is kind of the perfect project space show, which is really about making the work happen in the gallery. Again, the focus on process, on community, and on creating something that really couldn't exist anywhere else. So I'll stop sharing there and hand it back over to you.
Yeah, no, excellent. Thank you, Dylan. And I saw Gabriel on the screenshot. So that was a perfect lead in. So I say my next question, and again, I think Gabriel had some images for this. Obviously, Corona has changed everything. That's why we're all here on Zoom. And I'm just wondering how your particular gallery has navigated this in terms of, are you doing in-person shows and having people through the kinds of online things you're doing? So I'll go to you, Gabriel.
Yeah. So we have reopened. We sort of reopened. At first, we were only open by appointment. I think in maybe we reopened at the end of July or early August. And then we were at first only open by appointment. And then in September, we started to reopen regular hours. And we were fortunate that we have a very large, spacious space. And so it's, we can have up to 50 people in here and still maintain social distancing. And we've even had opening events, but we've had them where, you had to sign up in order to attend a specific time slot. So we don't reach capacity. But on a regular gallery day, we usually don't have, anywhere near capacity at all. Usually there's, I don't know, maybe, 5, 6 people coming in at any one time. But I wanted to kind of talk about, so we were locked down we were closed temporarily from mid-March to about mid-July, I think. And so, or even end of July, probably. And so we were doing virtual programming, and, as a lot of arts organizations were doing, we had to sort of very quickly figure out how to use Zoom and how to use Instagram Live and how to, live stream and do all these things. So, and we did virtual artist talks and things like that. But one of the programs that we did that I'm sort of most proud of is called 5 Mats. And that came out of that program came out of this, I guess we were this sort of, what we sort of realized that people were missing was a sense of community and sense of connection because of the time of social distancing. And so we developed this program called 5 Max. Me and my colleagues here with a few of our board members, and actually Ward Shelley is an artist and board member, and he was very instrumental in you know, helping us sort of figure out how to do this program. But I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So this is a graphic actually that Ward Shelley designed for the 5 Max program, and it very pretty succinctly or in visual terms kind of describes what the program was. So it's a 2-week program. During the first week, we invited 5 artists that the staff and board selected, invited to give short 5-minute presentations. So it's 5 artists, 5-minute presentations, and 5 minutes of audience Q&A. And that first week, it was open to the public, and anyone could Zoom in and attend and listen to the artist presentations, and then ask the artist questions if they wanted to. And then the audience members in the first week were given the opportunity to sign up for artists for presentation slots for week 2. And in week 2, each of the 5 artists had their own group of 5 other artists that had signed up to be in their presentation group. So it sort of formed these little communities around the original 5 artists. And in week 2, each of the artists that had signed up got to present their work to the group. And those were closed group sessions. And so they again, it was the same format, 5 minutes for each artist, and then 5 minutes of Q&A among the group. And then we left a little bit of time, like 10, 15 minutes at the end, where the group could sort of just kind of talk, you know, amongst themselves and kind of have a little bit of like a little social, a moment to socialize. So here's, sorry. Okay, so yeah, so this is an example. These were the artists in week 1 of 5 Max: Jean Shin, Karina Aguilera-Skwirsky in the top center, Mary Temple on the top right, Rudy Shepard bottom right, and then Clarity Haynes on the bottom left. So they were the first group of artists that presented in week 1. And then here is a slide of Jean, one of the slides that Jean showed. And you know, you can see that actually this slide is only showing SMAC Mellon staff, but there were other people on the call. And then in week 2, this is Kate Teal showing her work, and she was one of the people that signed up to participate in the group 2 session. And actually she was in Rudy Shepard's group. Yeah, so that kind of shows you. So yeah, and we did 3 of these programs. So we ended up, you know, that ended up being something like 60 artists got to participate in, you know, over the course of the 3 programs. And then, yeah, and so now we've continued to do virtual programming. Even when we have in-person programming in the gallery, we also try to broadcast live stream it on Zoom and or Instagram Live, so that people that can't make it to the gallery or don't feel comfortable traveling or being in public can still attend our events online.
Excellent.
So let me stop
Oh,
sharing. Okay.
thank you, Gabriel. So,
Yeah.
and that was kind of my next question, which I'll, what do you see as the permanent effects of the reprogramming and rethinking things for Corona? Like, it seems to me that there are some things that are going to stick around. I was telling somebody, it's like, at Pratt, we do faculty meetings. And they used to be on a Tuesday, twice a semester. Well, nobody travels to campus to go to our faculty meeting. The only people who showed up were already on campus for a class. So there'd be 15 people there. Now we do it on Zoom. There's 65 faculty members. And I'm like, you know what? Keep it on Zoom. I'm just saying, like, I can see there are some things that will continue. Because it seems like that was really successful, that project.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, especially during the height of the lockdown, I think people were not totally zoomed out yet. And they were, they were looking for ways of connecting and participating. So we got the first one got, we got more than 100 people in that first program. And then I think we were averaging maybe like 75 in the other ones, the other two. I think going back to your question about lasting effects, we're going to continue these sort of hybrid in-person and virtual programs. It does pose, it's a challenge and an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity because it gives us greater, it gives us a wider reach, and more people can access our programming, whether or not they can attend in person, or whether or not they live in New York, or they can be on the West Coast, or we had somebody Zoom in from Amsterdam on one of the 5 Max programs, and she just, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning over there, and she was like, oh, I really wanted to participate in this. So that's been one of the opportunities, but it's challenging, especially with the hybrid programs, because you're sort of coordinating a lot. There's like, you have somebody in the gallery that's like using their phone as a camera to capture it, the live stream, and then you're in the space and the artist is in the space, and we're sort of moving around or talking about different works, and I don't know. It's just, and we try to do like rehearsals beforehand, like of the week before, and so it's just like a lot to coordinate and a lot to manage. But we're getting the hang of it, and I think that the benefits exceed the sort of amount of work you have to put into it. So yeah.
I feel like for me, it just made everything more difficult. Like all my jobs just became a lot more. It was just like a lot more work. I was suddenly working a lot more than I had been for a while. But anyway, so EILEEN, same question. Like, how did you navigate the Corona? What do you think permanent effects are?
Sure. So when the lockdown happened, we were in the second session of the winter workspace. So the second session ended up, ending 2 weeks early. And we were trying to figure out how do we still support these artists? It was very, everything happened very quick. Like they had to move out, and that was that. And so we were thinking about what we could do in terms of virtual programming, and we were going to be showing Gracie Lawrence, who's was part of our Southern Project Space program for emerging artists, and she has an Instagram handle called Virtual Studio Visit Network. And so what she does is you spend like half an hour, 45 minutes in an artist studio. They're on her feed. And so we ended up collaborating with her on that. So that we're her first organization to collaborate with her. And we opened it up to all of the Winter Workspace artists to see who would be interested in doing a studio visit, essentially, on IG Live. And so it was a little bit experimental at first. I mean, I hadn't even used it to begin with, but I think, you know, after doing it a few times, and they really appreciated the opportunity to be able to share what they're working on. And so we started off learning about that platform, and then moving into over the summer, we were going to be showing eco-urgency, artists make the case. And so that focuses on critical issues affecting biodiversity and ecosystem. And we decided to make it a virtual format, using, maybe IG Live wasn't the right platform for that. So we started experimenting with Zoom. And our colleague Ginger was really instrumental in that. She's the curator of performing arts, but has a lot of this tech background. And she was able to, you know, be behind the scenes and manage that, because like Gabriel said, there's so many moving parts. If you're a speaker and then also manning the technology, it's really, it's difficult. To say the least, to be navigating all of that. And so we produced a series of 9 programs for that. I can just screen share this. And then it's also on our website, but just to give. So it's the image of Wave Hill.
Wow.
Gallery space. Oh, sorry, I'm too quick. Yeah, so this is when the trees had iced over last winter. And then you can see the Hudson River. And here is Glendora Gallery, where the gallery space is and where the resident studios are. And then we pivoted into these virtual programs. And this image features Rachel Frank, who did a virtual nature walk in Fort Greene Park. And so we really left it to the artists to think about what they wanted to do, whether it was a virtual walk or it ended up being a talk with a curator. So there were a lot of different formats that we were exploring. And then we had some in-person exhibitions as well. We had a show by our New York Community Trust Van Leer Fellow, Tiffany Jane Shin, and our 2 emerging artists, Grace Lee Lawrence and Zach Skinner. And so we're able to have those shows in person, limiting the capacity inside to, I think, 20 people at any one time. And then out the sculpture outside by Grace Lee, you could just walk outside at your leisure. But Wave Hill developed, you have to pre-register for tickets in order to visit the grounds. And so we're still implementing that. And so I think moving forward, the lasting effects are how do we, keeping this hybrid system, there's thinking about, with the uncertainties of the pandemic, do we then develop a virtual plan first? And if we can be in person, great. But if we develop a virtual plan first, then at least we have that in place. And so we are, for the Winter Workspace this year, we've developed office hours so that artists from both sessions can jump in and just check in, and it's just a space to see what we're all working on. And so I think without being in the situation, maybe we wouldn't have thought to do that to begin with.
Hello, did we lose? I think I did. Was that her computer?
It was very dramatic cut.
It was dramatic.
She comes
I think
right
it got unplugged. Anyway, Dylan, just to finish up the same question, what do you see as the lasting effects going forward?
Yeah.
Wait,
Well, I mean, you know,
Eileen's back. Wait a minute,
great. Eileen.
I think.
Oh, is she back?
Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Well, oh, Eileen, you're back.
Are you back?
Yeah, sorry about that. My computer shut down on me, which was very odd. So technological issues is something to navigate as well.
It was very dramatic.
So I think it's, yeah, having a hybrid system of virtual in person, but also, you know, thinking about bandwidth as well. You know, if we are, can we continue to do, or how many virtual programs can you continue to do if you're also running, you know, programs in person? So it's a tricky balance, I think.
No, it's a lot of work. I mean, you know, doing all this exercise, as I say, I feel like I've worked harder in the last, you know, 9 months. Thank you. And Dylan, back to you. Any last comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think just I would, you know, echo what Gabriel and Eileen, you know, are saying, and what you said, Bill. That I think, you know, it's been incredibly challenging to navigate, but that there have been some really amazing, you know, things that we've kind of discovered that we want to hang on to. And I think the biggest one is really in terms of participation and being able to collaborate, and I think also collaborate with other institutions. And you know, one example of something that, you know, I don't think we would have been able to do, or I don't think we would have exactly done in this way, was for Katya's show, that, you know, because we weren't able to have a public in the gallery, and we knew that we were going to do performances with artists who wanted to do performances virtually. You know, we came up with a few different, really, Katya and the artists came up with a few different ways of presenting that work, including a performance that happened, you know, down by the Whitney Museum. And we've also been, you know, collaborating with another nonprofit space that's an artist-run space in Cleveland, Ohio, that the artist M. Carmen Lane started, called Atonsic. And you know, the idea that Project Space here in New York would somehow be able to collaborate with this incredible project in Cleveland, but the fact that we're doing it, you know, virtually. We've also, you know, just had amazing connections with artists who are in Europe and California and Oklahoma and Texas, and you know, kind of all over the map. So that's been incredible. And you know, similarly, just having people turn up for this stuff. So you know, it's also just incredible the people you can reach, and I think within that we're learning a lot more, or you know, we're learning to do things that we really should have been doing all along in terms of providing better kinds of access. And you know, I think we're all kind of facing that, or at least people I speak with in arts administration roles are, you know, having to kind of address the fact that, you know, maybe we should have been doing this all along, but now we're really being pushed to increase access, and you know, have captioning and ASL when we can for events. And also an example of this is for our last exhibition, which was of the Shift residency cohort that just finished, and longer story on that, but I won't get into it. Shifting that residency online was quite interesting and a learning experience for everyone, but incredible in the end. Their exhibition that we did produce in person, Permissions, that was curated by Maya Seuss, who was a former Shift resident, had this whole kind of separate piece to it, which was image descriptions that were written by the artist Jordan Lord, working with the other artists in the show, and all of that translated to an online, a really rich online portal for this exhibition, which, you know, I think was something that we would have loved to have been doing, but now, you know, it's really the impetus is on providing ways of accessing this content and knowing that people can't show up to see it in person. So it's a really rich tool in a way. And I think, you know, the question is, how do we hold on to that? You know, similar to what Eileen was saying, how do we, you know, put resources toward that? Obviously, it's a lot of time. And I think sometimes we joke that, you know, we're like two project spaces now. We're the in-person kind of, you know, brick and mortar project space that my colleague Judy Gira, who's our program manager, is really, you know, in fact, currently installing our next show, which opens January 30th, Speculations on the Infrared, curated by Christopher Green. And so that show's being installed, and here I am talking to all of you. And we do have this kind of split, you know, virtual versus what's physical So hopefully we will find ways to resource and continue to be able to do things, virtually for the coming year at least. I was going to say earlier that the space itself, we realized we could have people in it, but as some of you know, EFA getting them into it is quite a challenge. Narrow hallway, narrow stairwell, 2 elevators that we are limited to having one person at a time, and we're on the 2nd floor. So it's not like a storefront gallery where you can just throw open the doors and windows and have people come in. So we've really had to adapt and adjust and find ways to have people, register in advance and come in. And but I think even there, the turnout has been amazing for our virtual events, and I think even the turnout for people coming to see our shows in person has been quite good. And so I have to ask, do we keep the reservation system going, thinking that people who RSVP in advance show up to things, as opposed to, there were days pre-coronavirus where we'd have 2 people come through the space, and now we have a pretty full calendar of, slots get filled up, and people do show up, which is amazing and kind of unanticipated, unexpected.
Great, thank you, Dylan. And this is interesting, and was thinking about, I think we all have learned a lot, and things are going to be different. We're not going to go back to the same. I mean, the fact that now when somebody's asking me to do a studio visit and they're, in another state, yeah, let's just get on Zoom. That has changed. And and I'm impressed with how resilient and creative you all have been in dealing with this, and the art world in general. Everybody really rose to the occasion. But I have to admit, I can't wait till I'm at a packed opening, people in person, people talking right at each other would be. I can't wait.